Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How will I see the previous one? I missed that. 26th July. And
I think it's on YouTube, Joyji.
so what do I go to? Narik Gatsa link.
Yeah, Narik gets a link, and there you'll be able to see the video.
Lexokla, there were many questions which were asked last time. We have forwarded the email to you. Hope you will address those questions today.
Hi, were you talking to me? Hello, Frieza. When? Like how long ago? I don't remember it at all. Okay, let me search my from which email address? Your private one? Nari Gatsaling email address. I don't have that any emails from that address. You send it to Tenzin Legtsok tlexok@gmail.com? Because I don't think it came. The spam. Okay. Do you have it? Can you just send it again now? Or you can also just say the question. Spam. No, it's not there. I remember getting one email with you from questions, but it seems like it was, like 2 to 3 weeks ago. You're sending again? Yeah, okay.
Lexokla, is 5 o'clock. Shall we start?
Sure. Yeah, we can start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Again.
Can you hear me, Bhaskar?
Yes. I hear you. Hi, everyone. Tashidlek. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to the second day of our July-August Sunday teachings with Venerable Tenzin Legtsok. On behalf of Narika Selling, I would like to welcome you all again. Today, Legtsok will be doing a session on anxiety, which I think a lot of us are going through a lot of anxiety today, these days because of the situation, and otherwise as well. Legtsok, I would like to hand over the session to you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. 1 minute. Actually, I want to share on my screen some prayers. If I can find it. Maybe I'll just leave it actually. So we'll do a short, take a few minutes to generate a positive motivation. And then if you like, we can go for refuge and for the Dharma Sangha by reciting the Buddha's name mantra 3 times, visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha, and then visualizing the name mantra. So yeah, focus your mind on object meditation for just a few moments first. Start to think about what's your motivation for engaging with this session on anxiety. And then, if you like, visualize yourself surrounded by all sentient beings who we're interconnected with and on whom all of our happiness depends. So we can begin with our mothers of this life or our mother of this life, immediately to our left. So imagine, just visualize and imagine your mother of this life seated just to your left. Feel your connection with her. Remember her kindness to you, how much she's given you, supported you. And then also your aunts, grandmothers, and other female family and friends. Imagine all to your left and behind you. Then imagine on your immediate right, your father of this life. Again, feel your interconnectedness with him. And then imagine also to your right and behind you, your grandfathers, brothers, male cousins, uncles, so forth. All of your male family and friends, imagine to your right and behind you. So these are all people in the category of friends or companions that support us. And then imagine the opposite, the antagonists, people whom we're most prone to become angry with, people whom we fear that they might harm us. So imagine these people seated directly in front of you, facing towards you, about a few meters distant from you. Recognize how they're the same as us in wishing to have happiness and well-being, wishing to be free from suffering, and how they've also been supportive of us and kind to us from life to life, even though in this life we find ourselves in some antagonistic relationship with them. So remember these antagonists. Try to generate love, loving kindness, compassion towards them as well. And then imagine all the other sentient beings who don't fit in either of these categories of friend or antagonist. So all the other human beings, all the other animals, and then beings of the 6 realms. Imagine them all in human form, seated all around us, participating together with us in this session. Remember how we've been from beginningless time, we've been connected with all of these sentient beings in countless different ways. How every happiness we've had all has come about in dependence upon these countless sentient beings. And how every happiness and state of well-being we'll have in the future, up to full enlightenment, all will come about in dependence upon these sentient beings. So try to generate the strong aspiration to use this life, and especially this next hour and a half during this session, that whatever we do may not cause the least harm to any sentient being, and rather only benefit sentient beings. For that purpose, then I'll engage in this session on anxiety in the Buddhist teachings. And if you're familiar with the attitude of bodhicitta, and try to generate bodhicitta, thinking that in order to free all sentient beings from suffering and bring them every happiness, up to liberation from samsara and full enlightenment, I myself must quickly become enlightened. Therefore, I'll engage in this session. And then if you like, you can visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front of you, seated on a golden throne, embellished with jewels, supported by 8 lions, 8 powerful lions. Upon the throne is a fully open lotus blossom with 1,000 petals, representing perfect renunciation. Upon that is a sun disk, representing wisdom, and upon that a moon disk, representing compassion, the Buddha's perfection of renunciation, wisdom, and compassion. Upon these sits Shakyamuni Buddha in the aspect of a fully ordained monk. He looks upon you and at the same time upon all sentient beings with great affection. From every pore of his body, light rays radiate out throughout the universe, purifying sentient beings and blessing them all to be free from suffering and guiding them all on the path to perfect liberation, nirvana, and full enlightenment. So try to generate the mind of refuge, recognizing the dangers of falling into different sufferings of samsara, wishing to be free from those, and reflecting how the Buddha and his teachings and the spiritual community, the Sangha, have the ability to protect us from sufferings of this life, future lives, and samsara. And how they skillfully lead us to from one state, from happiness to happiness, up to full enlightenment. So with that mind of refuge, we can recite the Buddha's name mantra, Tayata Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Swaha 3 times as a way of going for refuge. Tayata Om Muni Maha Muni Swaha Tayata Om Muni Maha Muni Swaha Tayata Om Muni Maha Muni So imagine the Buddha is very pleased with your intention, and he shrinks in size to just the height of your thumb, comes to the space above the crown of your head, and abides there to guide and protect you. You can imagine an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha also goes to abide above the crown of every other sentient being. Likewise, guiding and protecting all of that. Okay, so we can end the preliminaries there. So this session, last session on anger, I had quite a detailed outline and some quotations and a big plan what to present. This session on anxiety, I don't. In Buddhism, like anxiety, anger is one of the 3 root afflictions. Anger, attachment, and ignorance. So there's a lot of, passages and a lot of advice and definitions and stuff on anger. There's a lot of material, right? But anxiety is not, anxiety is more like, well, fear is a more common, anxiety is not expressly talked about much in the Buddhist teachings. Of course, it comes up in different places, but usually under the label of fear, right? So, so I've been thinking, in preparing for this session and thinking about different things and reading different things, I've been focusing more on, how to deal with different kinds of fear, and how fear is kind of used and how it's, especially afflictive fear. I mean, fear is not always necessarily an afflictive emotion, right? There's a kind of wise fear, of something, like a realistic, knowing that, oh, if I do, A, B, and C, then it's going to cause me to experience, this, and this kind of problem in the future that I don't want. That's kind of wisdom, right? And so therefore, like a good example is, say, if you're walking, near a cliff, near the edge of a cliff, then it's kind of wise to recognize, well, if I take a few steps in the wrong direction or I slip and fall, then I'm going to get hurt, if I fall over the cliff. So therefore, I need to stay away from the edge of the cliff. I need to keep myself safe. So that's a kind of wise fear. No, there's nothing wrong with that. And having that fear actually protects us by recognizing just the reality of, oh, it's possible I could fall over that cliff edge. These days, it seems many people, when they're, at a beautiful waterfall or a cliff edge and taking a selfie, in the midst of taking the selfie, they forget about that reality that there's no guardrail there. There's nothing protecting us from falling except our own caution, right? Our own keeping ourselves, balanced, not tripping, not falling, not getting, not standing on ground that might slip or where we might slip and fall. So that's a kind of wise fear. But so what I think what you're expecting me to talk about from what we've advertised is, of course, an afflictive fear, not a wise fear, but a kind of fear that does just disturb the mind, and thereby destroys the peace of our mind. And it doesn't have any useful function. It's something we want to get rid of. It just causes us more, anxiety, stress, distracts our attention from doing anything useful. So what I wanted to say at the outset is I don't have a big elaborate outline for a presentation today, and I want to hear questions. So I want to take more questions from you all about what kind of anxiety are you dealing with? Like Bhaskar mentioned in the introduction, these days, maybe a lot of people have a lot of anxiety because, the economic situation is so uncertain, so unclear. I mean, people are afraid of, getting sick, getting infected by this coronavirus, and then there's not sure what the government's going to do. It's not sure, when, if you, even if you, like I have a friend here in the house has a broken tooth, how do you just, something as simple as, usually you just go to the dentist and get it fixed. But now it's like, well, is it, the dentist are not open. When is the dentist going to be open? If it gets really bad, what do I do? So there's all kinds of other complications that come with the lockdowns we're experiencing and the pandemic. Not to mention, like, when is the pandemic going to be over? Yeah, there's all kinds of problems. So I'd like to hear questions from you all, and maybe, yeah, not only questions, but kind of descriptions about, well, what kind of anxiety are you dealing with? And then maybe in response to that, I can talk about some of the different strategies for dealing with fear and anxiety that are found in different places, in the Buddhist teachings, in different contexts. But because from past experience, no one's just going to jump up and ask a question right away. It usually takes people a little time to get warmed up. So there's a few questions actually left over from last session, I think, which I was just given. So last session, remember, last week was about anger. All right, okay, so I'll just answer these questions briefly first. So this is about anger. When a person with whom you get angry is a stranger, how do you know his positive side or aspect? Okay, good question. So, yeah. So I'm sure I was saying last week, when you get angry with someone, one antidote to anger, because one aspect of anger is it focuses exclusively on negative things that you see about a person. So, I mean, in that way, just to relate that to anxiety, what we're talking about this week, anxiety is similar in that when we're anxious about something, we tend to look exclusively at negative scenarios, right? The worst case scenarios, or the how things might go wrong, and then worry about that, rather than also. And then sometimes we tend to have an unbalanced perspective where we exaggerate the likelihood that things will go badly, right? That's one aspect of anxiety, is you exclusively think about how things might go wrong, and you exaggerate. I mean, not you, but we because I have anxiety too. We exaggerate how the likelihood that things will go wrong, so it distorts our perception rather than having a more balanced kind of perspective about, well, what is the likelihood that that worst case scenario is really going to happen, and then the second less worse. Of course, I mean, there's a wisdom in being ready for those things, but yeah, if it gets too distorted, it becomes quite crippling. So yeah, to answer this person's question though, because with anger, I was saying anger focuses exclusively on negative aspects of say a person that you get angry at, and so one way to reduce anger is to try to focus on positive qualities of that person. Well, if it is a stranger, you don't know the person. I mean, even when you meet a stranger, well, you could just imagine, positive aspects that they might have. I mean, because the anger focuses on, say it's a stranger, maybe, a typical situation is like, maybe you go to a shop to buy something, and the salesperson who you've never met before is being really pushy and kind of rude, right? And you're getting irritated of the person. Well, one way in that situation, it's true, you might not know many positive qualities because you haven't had past experience with that person. But you can remember that, well, why is this person being so pushy and maybe, to try to sell me something? Because they need to make a profit. They need to make a living. Maybe they haven't been able to make many sales for a long time, and they have to provide food for their family, or they have to pay their rent, or they have medical bills to pay for. So there might be all kinds of things going on in the background, that you don't know about, that are pressures on this person, or burdens on this person's shoulders, that's making them feel like, they really need to sell stuff to somebody. And so they see you walking by, and maybe you look twice at their goods, their clothes or shoes or whatever. You know how, it is in big market areas. If you just look, and there's salespeople hanging out, at the entrance to the store, if you just double take, you look twice at something, as you're like, oh, that looks a little interested, then already they start talking to you. So that, I mean, in that case, yeah, it's true. You might not see positive things about it might be difficult to know a lot of positive things about the person, but you can generate more empathy, empathy for the person by thinking about reasons why they might, how difficult it might be for them to make money, right? And how there might be a lot of pressures on them to be able to make money. And that's why they're kind of treating you like this. And then another way is to think is to recognize that they probably don't realize that for you in particular, them talking to you that way is annoying and offensive. And it's just going to make you not want to buy something from them. Because there might be many other people who, when a salesperson talks to them that way, they don't find it annoying or offensive. They find it kind of, maybe it draws them into the store or something. I don't know. There must be a reason the salesperson uses that technique, because it must work with some people, right? So it might not be something that other people find annoying. And then there's always the basic, the basic observation that, fundamentally that person, they want happiness, they want, and for them at that time, their happiness seems to depend upon, treating you, they have this idea that if they treat you this way, then that will, somehow bring them happiness, probably through the route of, making money or making money off you or something like that. So that will bring them happiness. So you think about those things, those aspects to try to reduce anger. And the person's second question here was, when I was a third person watching an adult who gets angry with his or her loved ones out of love and concern for them, is the adult's behavior rational? Okay, so last week again, when I was talking about anger, I was saying one way to analyze anger is that there's three ways to look at anger. One is to look at your own experience of becoming angry. Another is to look at your experience of being the object of someone else's anger, so someone else being angry at you. And the third way is to look at your experience of being a third person observer, seeing one person get angry at another person, right? So when we analyze anxiety, you can do the same, to understand what anxiety is, how your anxiety functions, how anxiety functions in general. You can look at these three perspectives. But so this person's asking, so when I'm a third person observing, and I see one adult get angry at someone they love, their loved ones, maybe their children or their spouse or their parents, out of concern, and they're getting angry at the person out of concern for that person. Is that adult's behavior rational or not? Well, that's a good question. I mean, because what does rational behavior mean in that situation? Like, say, for example, to make it a little more concrete and to help try to answer the question a little more clearly, say, like the example of like a parent, they want their child to study, right? They have children that are in school, maybe middle school or high school or college or whatever, and they recognize that if the child doesn't study, then the child won't be able to go to a good school in the future. They won't be able to get a good degree. They won't have a good education, and then they won't be able to get a good job. Then they won't be able to get a good spouse, and then they'll have a difficult life, right? Because they won't have good work, and so forth. So maybe they see the child not recognizing these things and not studying, not taking their classes seriously, not taking the studies seriously, and just wasting a lot of time, maybe playing on the phone or hanging out with friends. And then they get, and they tell them again and again and again, it's important, you need to do your homework, you need to keep up with class, you need to try to get good grades, you need to study well, take your education seriously. And the child just doesn't, right? Doesn't pay attention to what the parent's saying. And then the parent gets irritated, annoyed at the child, and gets angry at the child, right? So then is that rational? Well, what would rational be in that situation? What would be rational is to do something that is going to influence the child so that they do study, right? That's the goal, right? The goal is to do something to encourage or to encourage or to motivate somehow the child to get a good education, right? To take their education seriously, and from their side, from the child's side, to put in the effort that they need to get a good education. So then you have to ask the question, well, is getting angry at the child and maybe scolding them or shouting at them, is that going to bring about that effect, right? Of them of them taking their education more seriously? Because if it is going to bring about that effect, then maybe that would be rational. But if it's not going to bring about that effect, if rather it's going to make the child be resentful and just want to take revenge, and maybe by taking revenge, just do more. I mean, as a way of taking revenge to the parent, just do more of what they know is going to harm the parent, which is not study, right? Just ignore their advice, ignore the parent's desires for the child to study, and then just become belligerent, kind of, right? Just totally rebel against the parent. So if that's going to be if getting angry at the child and like shouting at them, say, you have to study or else I'm going to, kick you out of the house or something, if that's going to make them less likely to study, then it's not irrational. Then it's not rational, right? So, I've had parents. I haven't been a parent. I haven't raised children of my own. So yeah, this way I'm a little short-handed trying to answer what's the best course of action in the scenario I've laid out. But I mean, from having been a child, right, and gone to school and kind of had, generally I studied pretty well, so I didn't have this kind of conflict with my parents much. I think I studied better than my parents did when they went to school, probably. So they didn't have much ground to stand on when they saw me slacking off. But I know from experience that sometimes, anger, when someone's angry at us, we don't feel like they understand us, right? We feel usually like they really don't understand what's going on with us. And because anger always has, anger has an element of wanting to harm another person, right? And last week when I went over the definition, that's one aspect of anger, is a desire to harm. So whenever we feel that someone has a desire to harm us, that their intention really isn't to benefit us, but their intention really is to harm us in some way, then we don't trust the person. It erodes our trust for the person. And we don't want to be around that person. We don't want to interact with the person. So I think in the case, where a parent really get angry at the child, where they really want to do something to harm the child, I think it's difficult to argue that behavior is going to in any way help accomplish the aim of having the child like study better or follow advice, take their education more seriously, listen to the parents' advice. I don't think it will have that effect. But you have to remember that there's a big difference between really scolding or reprimanding or allotting some punishment, some kind of consequential punishment for not studying out of anger, motivated by anger, motivated by wish to, just being sick and tired of this behavior the child's exhibiting, and then wanting to if you're plowing a field with oxen and they're not going forward, then to make them go forward, you hurt them, right? You whip them. And by that way make them go forward. If the motivation is really to harm the person, then I think anything you do is going to be counterproductive. But if you can make, if the motivation sincerely within your own mind, the motivation is really to benefit, right, and nothing more, not to harm whatsoever. It's really out of love and concern for the person, and really, sincerely wanting to benefit, and you express that clearly, convey that clearly, and then show your frustration. That could really benefit, that could really make them take more seriously what you're saying, and really have the sense that, I better, really think about what mom or dad is saying, because I can see it's something that, they're very passionate about, maybe in a very disturbed way, but that's something that is really concerning them. And maybe there is some aspect of, what they're saying that I don't see clearly. Maybe I am really taking this whole education schooling thing for granted. So, it might have a positive outcome in some situations to, to scold, to be very forceful, to, to raise your voice or whatever. But it's important that you check your motivation. And then the motivation isn't to harm, right? Isn't one of, and thereby isn't one of anger. It's really one of concern. So that could be rational. Okay. So, and then the last question here. When you are driven by a situation beyond a certain level of your patience, and you get angry with the other person, who is your loved one, say your son or daughter, is it justified? Well, no, it's not justified. I mean, when you really get angry with, say your son or daughter or someone you love, actually it's an indication of your weakness, right? Of your having reached your limit, right? The weakness of your patience, the weakness of your tolerance, right? Because we all, I mean, it's true, we have limits. I mean, we only, can endure so much, and then maybe we lose it, and we all have our different triggers and things, but we have to, recognize those, and then hopefully just walk away from the situation before we reach our limit. And we also have to continually work on expanding our limits, becoming more tolerant, becoming more patient. I know, for like, as an example, like I'm much more tolerant about some things than I used to be. For example, when I first came to India, then it used to really, kind of disturb me when I'm sitting on a bus and other people like crowd in, and you're just like sitting so like, arm to arm and being squeezed, or someone, is kind of half sitting on you. Those things are kind of, they're kind of irritating me. Or also this thing I was talking about, when you're walking by a shop and the salesperson calls you in, a few times to come look at their goods. Because where I'm from in the US, people don't do that. So I just, felt like that's kind of rude and sort of a way, it's kind of a way of like infringing on your personal space. Both of those things, people standing very close to you, or you're in a line, you're in a queue, like to buy tickets at the railway station. It's a classic example. And people standing behind you, they're pushing their body like right up against the back of you, pushing you forward. So those things that they used to annoy me, but now I realize, well, it's just part of the culture here. That's just the way people, many people, that's the way they do things. And it's not any like, they have any animosity for you, or they think it's going to, they don't realize, or they think it's, it's kind of inappropriate anyway, which is, so now I've become used to those things and totally tolerant, right? So that's just an example of how, our level of tolerance can increase, our level of patience can increase. And that's something, if we see we have a problem with anger, then we need to try to increase our patience, our tolerance more and more and more until, I mean, ideally, you imagine a Buddha, like nothing disturbs their mind. There's no situation that they could ever be in where it causes them to be, annoyed or get angry. So, I mean, thinking that our anger is justified is just kind of a way of making an excuse for our lack of patience, right? I mean, ideally, we generate, infinite patience, but of course, that's not the reality of where we're at now, for most of us. So when we're driven by a situation that where it goes beyond our patience, right? So you need to identify, look at the instances when you get angry and identify the conditions that cause you to run out of patience, right? I think for all of us, it's usually when we're tired, we have less patience. When we're hungry and we're exhausted from having been working long hours, then our patience is less. When we're already irritated about something else, then we have less patience to deal with, another person's, kind of dramas, right? Whereas, and when we're having a bad day, sometimes we just wake up in the morning, get out of bed, and we're just in a bad mood. Then our patience is going to be less. We have less capacity just to deal with other people's kind of complaining, and you know, they're you know, just kind of provoking us, and stuff like that, you know, other people's drama. So we have to recognize those things, and when we recognize we're in kind of a more fragile situation, then do, you know, things to protect ourselves, like just, you know, be ready to tell people, can you just wait and talk about this till later, like I just can't deal with it right now. You know, I'm really hungry and tired right now. I need to get some rest, have something to eat. Can we just discuss this later? And in those ways, you know, those kind of simple ways, by being more self reflective, or, you know, what do you say? By being self-reflective, then we're kind of self-aware that, okay, I'm in a bad mood now, so I better just try to avoid situations where, you know, I might get I might lose it, you know, I might be pushed over my limit. But that's not to say we should just always try to avoid situations that are going to irritate us, but rather we should welcome the situations. But that's easier when we have a stable basis. We're well rested, we're well fed, we're in a good mood, and then we know this is going to be a difficult situation. This might be a difficult person to deal with. But then also, you know, you still might lose it. I know I've been before, you know, even as a monk, been like gone to spend a day or two with someone who I know that I find really difficult to be around the person. Even I had a good friend. My sister warned me, like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like, you know, this person is really difficult." And I was like, "No. I think, you know, I'm in a place now. I can deal with it. They won't provoke me. I'll just kind of, I can handle it. I'll just let it go." And then sure enough, like after a couple of days, it reached my limit. No, even I just been doing my morning meditation session. I felt really good, you know, and came downstairs to breakfast, and they said something to me that I was just like, I couldn't imagine, you know, one human being could say that, you know, that kind of thing to another person. I was just totally shocked. And then I really lost it. So got really angry. So yeah, I mean, but I mean, so is it justified? I mean, definitely, like in that situation, like I think what that person said was totally wrong, but the way I reacted also was not right. It's not justified. I mean, just getting angry, getting really, you know, upset and angry. Okay, it's one thing to get upset, to feel hurt about something. That's okay, you know, to feel upset. But then immediately for that to give way into, I mean, and also to be defensive. Yeah, naturally, you know, automatically, it's like our you know, our natural response. We feel defensive, but then to feel justified in like retaliating, you know, lashing out at that person in response, in that moment, yeah, we feel justified. That's one aspect of anger, is you feel justified in whatever you do. You feel justified, even though oftentimes there's a niggling in the back of your mind. It's like the angel on the other shoulder who you're totally ignoring in that moment. That sometimes you feel like, oh yeah, I know this isn't really right, but in, you know, the heat of the moment, like I don't care, I'm just going to do it anyway. That's, you know, another aspect of anger. So then, yeah, in that moment, you definitely feel justified. But, you know, thinking later on, well, what would have been a healthier way, a better way to deal with that situation? You know, in the light of that wisdom, you can see that, yeah, that's not only is it not justifiable way to act, but it's not even a way to act that you're going to achieve your own aims, not to mention kind of be the kind of person you want to be, not to mention react to that person in such a way that you reduce the likelihood that they're going to treat you that way again in the future, right? So yeah, those are all yeah, kind of ways to think about those questions. And then, okay, I see there's something else in the chat. Okay, so there's another question in the chat here, and then I'll take questions from you all who are live in the Zoom room. Good evening. So this person's question: how does one change one's nature where there is an underlying low-grade anxiety at play concerning something all the time, be it kids who are away, financial security, health, of near and dear ones, etc., etc. Okay, so great. Thank you for your question. It's right on topic. How does one change one's nature? Okay, so that is a question. How does one change one's nature? Where there is an underlying low-grade anxiety at play concerning something all the time. So concerning different things, be it kids who are away, they're living somewhere else, we're concerned about them. Are they taking care of their health? Are they taking appropriate measures to, not get sick? Are they, are they cooking well? Are they hanging out with good people who are good influence and so forth? So concerned about our kids who are away, concerned about our own financial security. I know like one kind of anxiety some people have is like, especially when you're, when you reach the end of your career, so you've been saving up, your life savings to cover expenses during your retirement, but you're not sure, none of us are sure how long our retirement will last, like how long we'll live. So it's always it can be a source of anxiety to be like, well, am I going to have enough to pay for, my whatever expenses I have in my retirement until the end of my life, especially medical bills, because they can be really high. So financial security, and then one's own health. What's going to happen with one's own health, and with near and dear ones, and so forth. So yeah, how to deal with these kinds of low-grade anxiety? Now that's a good question. Well, yeah. Okay, so this brings me to my kind of initial piece of advice for dealing with anxiety from Buddhist practice. One initial kind of way to deal with anxiety is to change the focus of our attention, right? Change the focus of our attention. So anxiety, so this kind of low-grade anxiety has a lot to do with rumination, right? What's called rumination, where you think about, you dwell on. So, and how does that have to do with attention? Because you direct your attention again and again to things that cause you to feel concern and cause you to worry, basically. Cause you to have fear about what might happen. Again and again, we turn the attention of our mind, so the direction of our mind, we focus on things that cause us to have fear. When we think about our kids are away, and then we think of the things we're afraid might be happening. Maybe they're hanging out with the wrong people. Maybe they're not, eating well. Maybe they're going around without a mask. Maybe they're not practicing social distancing. Maybe they're not really taking the virus seriously. Maybe they're not really taking their career seriously. Maybe they're calling in sick to work all the time. So then when we direct our attention to all these things that we're like, oh, I'm afraid that might be happening. I'm afraid that might be happening. I'm afraid they might be doing that. Then we stir up fear. We give rise to fear. We produce fear in our mind, and that disturbs our mind, right? Which causes us to be anxious, right? It puts us on edge. Because you have to think about what anxiety is. It's a response to fear, right? And it's an irrational response to fear in most cases. So anxiety is that it's very much related with our very primitive neural system, our neurobiology, right? So in a primitive way, when we're wired such that our brain and our neurosystem, neurosystem is wired in such a way that when we see fear, like we hear I was just reading in preparing for this course, actually, not this course, this session, I was reading from this book, and I'll hold it here. Divine Stories, Classics of Indian Buddhism. So different stories from sutras. So one of the stories was just starting off, and the Buddha was explaining how animals generate fear of the lion, right? The most powerful animal in the forest is the lion. So the Buddha was explaining how, I think in the late afternoon or the evening, when the lion's about to go out hunting, he's been sleeping all day in his cave. And then he gets up from his cave and kind of stretches himself and then gives a great roar, a very powerful roar that, you know, all the animals of the forest, they can hear the lion with this deep growl, not growl, but roar. They can hear the lion roaring, and they know he's about to come out of his lair and start hunting, right? So then the Buddha says the animals who live in holes, like the rabbits and maybe, I don't know, they go down in their holes. The animals who live in the trees, like the monkeys, they scurry up into the trees, yeah, and so forth. So how animals, when they hear, you know, the sound of a predator, then they feel fear, right? And they become anxious, and then they go into like a, you know, response mode, right? They hear a sound, they feel afraid, and then it causes adrenaline to rush. It causes them to freeze at first, and then causes them to flee and go find cover, go to seek shelter, go to seek cover, right? So the problem is, I mean, that's all fine, right? But the problem is now in our modern world situation where we find ourselves, you know, the response to the things that cause us fear is not as simple as just running back to shelter and closing, you know, running into the house and closing the door. Everything's much more complicated, right? So like, you know, like the examples this person gives, when you think about my children who are living in Delhi while I'm here in Guwahati, what are they doing? When we think about that and we feel fear, the problem is the same neurological response happens. We kind of freeze for a moment, or adrenaline rushes, and then we feel really uncomfortable. And it prepares it's the fight or flight response. It prepares our body, you know, so anxiety has to do with, partly it's a physiological response, right? Adrenaline and other, you know, neurotransmitters, other hormones, they flood through our bloodstream and they kind of cause us to tense up, cause our heart rate to go up, cause us to kind of contract our muscles to respond to, like, you know, a predator, which is what we're you know, evolutionarily wired to do. But the problem is there is no predator to respond to. We're responding to our own fear, right? So we have to learn how to respond to our own fear and reduce that, rather than, you know, deal with the external situation, unless there is something concrete we can do, right? So basically, this comes back to the strategy for, this initial strategy for dealing with anxiety, this underlying anxiety, is to see how anxiety is produced by fear. In this case, in most of our cases, immediately present in our environment, like a lion or a snake or something, which we can easily, you know, respond to in an appropriate way. You know? Rather, the fears that we deal with in our modern, you know, circumstances are, you know, in our mind. Not that they're just in our mind, but that when we think about things, you know, something's happening with my children, what's happening with my relatives, and when we think about the future, what's going to happen with my health, what's going to happen with my financial situation. So those kind of fears. So we have to see how just thinking about those things again and again and again, it causes us to again and again react with fear. Then it causes, you know, our heart rate to go up, causes our muscles to clench, you know, causes anxiety and, you know, causes stress. It eliminates our ability to relax and just enjoy, right? Eliminates our ability to enjoy, which helps us relax, right? So enjoying things helps us to relax. Being relaxed, we can enjoy things, right? So whereas the opposite of that is that when we think about things which cause us, that we're worried about, worry, you know, causes us to be afraid, causes us to not enjoy things. When we're not enjoying things, probably we're more prone to worry and fear. So there's two kind of feedback loops. One is, you know, leads us to be more stressed and uptight. The other helps us to enjoy, be more relaxed. So, so the initial strategy to deal with anxiety is to see how it comes from it comes back to our attention. How do we direct our attention? And how do we use our attention? If we direct our attention again and again and again to things that cause fear, remember there's a wise fear, right? That if we're standing next to a cliff, you know, if we're walking along a cliff, it's wise to be, you know, cognizant that if I step too far in the wrong direction, if I misstep, if I step on a piece of loose earth, I could fall. And so we stay a little farther away from the cliff. So in that case, there's a fear of something that might happen, and then we respond to it by reducing the fear, by putting ourselves in such a situation that we have less, that we're less, it's less likely that that bad thing will happen. Right? It's less likely we'll fall over the cliff, and thereby, if we, you know, we walk maybe 2 meters away from the cliff edge, 2 more meters away from the cliff edge, then we can relax and enjoy the walk. But then, even though we do that, if we keep thinking again and again and again about what happens if I fall over the cliff, what happens if I fall over the cliff, then we're just creating, you know, fear for no good reason, right? And it's just causing us to be more stressed, more anxious. So, so although there is, so we have to distinguish between wise fear and just destructive fear, right? So a healthy way to, you know, deal with the worry about what's happening with my children or a financial situation or health is to recognize, okay, what am I concerned about there is happening? What am I concerned about might happen in the future? Is there something I can do in a concrete way to reduce that, you know, the possibility of that happening now, right? So react in a constructive way. And then if there is, then just do that. Focus on doing something to stabilize your financial situation, doing something to protect your health, doing things to protect your health, doing things, you know, speaking to your children about what you're concerned about them. But then when there's reached the point where there's nothing more you can do about it, let go of it. Don't keep directing your attention towards the things that cause you fear, but direct your attention towards things that bring you joy, right? That bring you enjoyment and help you be relaxed. So, and then recognize where I see the question coming from is that, you know, we can become addicted to fear, right? We can become, because we can have the view that if I don't think about these bad things that might happen to me or others in the future again and again and again, then I'm not being responsible, or then it's more likely they're going to happen. But we have to assess, is that real or not? You know, we can create a habit of just thinking about things that cause us fear and things that cause us anxiety. So if we have that kind of habit, we have to see that and see how it's destroying our life, making it impossible for us to fully enjoy anything, making it impossible for us to relax. We all have to accept that the bad things might happen to us. I mean, death could happen any day, but that's something we just have to accept. And then if there are ways, things that we can do to reduce the likelihood that we'll die today or tomorrow, or you know, that will cut short our life, we do those things. But oftentimes it's the case, there's nothing more to do. And then we need to learn to let go of those things that cause us fear and just let go and just like, okay, I'll just let go of that and direct our attention towards ways that we can do other constructive things that we enjoy. You know, be it to do with our career, be it to do with having, you know, cultivating more meaningful relationships with the people in our family, our friends. You know, we have to not just worry about bad things that might happen, but think about good things that can happen, right? That's kind of one of the biggest, I think, detractors, the biggest drawbacks of anxiety and fear is it locks us into this cycle where we only think about negative possible outcomes, and so it cuts us off from our creativity, where we can think about, you know, possible positive outcomes and what I can do to make those more likely to happen. You know, think about instead of thinking about, you know, in the morning, what are all the, you know, all the terrible things that might happen to me today, and how can I possibly avoid those things happening? I mean, it's like a totally negative way of looking at the day. Rather think about what are all the excellent things that might happen today, and how can I make it more likely that those will happen? You know, what are some really good things I can do today? And focus on that. Then, by the way, you'll eliminate, you know, so many negative possibilities. Okay, so that's more than enough response to that that question. So, any other questions?
Zarina wanted to ask one question. She raised her hand. Zarina.
Zarina, hello.
Hello, Venerable. Hello, everyone. I had this question about fear and root afflictions. It is not included into the root afflictions. And as far as I remember, it is not included into the secondary afflictions either.
Yeah,
So,
also I think so. There are 22 secondary afflictions in the list of member factors. I don't think fear is in there. I meant to check before the session. I didn't get a chance, but I don't think fear is there.
I
But that
also
doesn't
think
mean it's not an affliction. There are many destructive emotions that are not included in that list, in those lists.
Okay. My question was more about why is it not included into root afflictions, although fear can be a very common and strong emotion for all of us.
Yeah. That's a good question, and I don't know is the short answer. I'm not really sure why, this question came up recently with another, a positive emotion, love. The positive emotion of love, loving kindness, it's not included in the list of 11 positive mental factors that are virtuous minds. Love is not included. Also, compassion is not included, which are very common, things to meditate on. So why they're not included, I don't know. Why fear is not included in the three root afflictions, I can answer why it's not included there, because it's not one of the fundamental forces of just basic ignorance, grasping at things as, at an inherently existent self, or one of the two fundamental forces of attraction, which is attachment, or aversion, which is anger, right? So clearly fear is not one of those three root afflictions. But then on up, I really don't know. There's a list of I think the 6 root afflictions. So in addition to ignorance, attachment, and anger, you add, I think, afflicted doubt, arrogant pride, and one other one. I don't remember. Doubt, pride, wrong views. I think wrong views is the other one. But anyway, it's not. Yeah, fear is not included there. I think fear is also not included in the 22 secondary afflictions. But why? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because, like I was saying, there are also wise kinds of fears. There are kinds of fear that are not afflicted. The fear of, I might fall into the lower realms. If I go around lying and cheating and killing people, I might fall into the lower realms. I mean, yeah, that does disturb the mind, but it's actually kind of a helpful thing, like the fear of falling off a cliff when you're walking along a cliff. But then, doubt is also that way. Doubt, generally we think of doubt as kind of bad, but that's not always the case. I mean, we should be skeptical about things. If we go to buy like a pair of shoes, and the salesman at the shoe store is telling us, they're going to last you they're going to last you for 5 years. They'll never wear out. These are the best made shoes in all of the world. And they cost a whole lot more than any other shoes. We should have some doubt about, is that true or not? Is this really a good deal, or is this totally, am I just going to get totally ripped off? So there are healthy kinds of doubt, and then there's afflicted kind of doubt, right? That just paralyzes you from doing anything. So afflicted doubt is one of the main afflictions listed, whereas afflicted fear, it well could be, but I don't know why it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
There is another question Roy has asked. Fear is such a destructive emotion, yet it's not a distinct poison. It must then be a constituent of one of the 3 poisons. Which one would that be?
Oh, okay. Good question, Roy. So he's asking, is it a constituent, or is it more related to ignorance or attachment or anger, right? one of the three root afflictions. Which is it more related to? Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's more related to attachment. Usually fear, because when we have fear. So check if in your own experience if this seems to be true or not, and challenge me on it if it doesn't seem to be true. But I think when I was thinking about anxiety and fear, usually, what's one I was thinking about, something I'm anxious about. I know, I was looking at my own experience, different types of anxiety. One of the ones very clear for me is when I go to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned, and they're like scaling your teeth, and at some point they're going to hit like a part that it really hurts. Right? It's just inevitable. Like right at the beginning, it might not hurt, but like for me, I have my gums are receding, right? So I have this kind of sensitive place just on the tooth, just next to the gum, where it's like it really hurts when they scale it there. So you're lying on the dental's chair, and my body already is like tensing up as soon as the dentist like sits down and starts turning on that scaler machine, right, and put it in the mouth. And then, but I was thinking, but okay, why? But what causes me to be afraid? Well, because I'm anticipating the pain that I don't want, right? So how is that related to attachment? I think because I'm attached to pleasurable sensations, right? And I'm averse to the painful sensations, right? So if I really didn't have any attachment to physical sensations, one way or the other, I'm not, because we can be attached both to having pleasant things, and we can also be attached to not having unpleasant things happen to us, right? So I think the fear, it really comes about through, having attachment to not having unpleasant things happen to us. So in this case, because of the attachment to not having the pain, of the scaler like going across these tender nerves on my teeth, then I react, right? And I anticipate like how bad it's going to be, and that anticipation causes me to tense up and causes me to react more strongly than probably is necessary, right? Whereas, so I think one way to deal with that, just like one way to reduce our attachment, is to practice contentment, right? Where we're just content with the way things are, and whatever happens, we think okay, like having total acceptance. Whatever happens, it's okay, whether it's pleasant or whether it's unpleasant. That's all in the nature of samsara. That's all in the nature of human experience. Those are they're like think about death. I mean, for many of us, for many people, death is one of the ultimate causes of fear and anxiety. Mostly if we're everything's going well, we're healthy, and we don't we're in a good situation, then we don't think about death much. But like if we get very sick, say we get cancer, or the neighbors all have the coronavirus, and I was just spending time with them last week, or something, or a close friend just suddenly is like jogging and has a heart attack and dies or something, then we think about death like more. So if we haven't thought about death and much, then there's a big potential that will cause us a lot of anxiety and fear. So the way to deal with that, the Buddhist scriptures described, is to accept the fact of death. Accept the fact that eventually we're going to die, and rather than just dwell on all of our fears around it and all of our attachment to death not happening. We can be attached to death not happening, right? That's what causes us to be averse to it. That's what causes us to have a lot of fear and anxiety about it, because we don't want it to happen. We're attached to it not happening. So rather than just being caught up in our attachment to that not happening, which is totally unrealistic, because eventually it's going to happen. The way to deal with that is to learn to come to terms with death by recognizing that, one, it's inevitable, and being content with that, being okay with that. And two, by turning our attention to be like, okay, well, when death does happen, what can I do to make it less traumatic, right? What can I do to make it so I feel like I've done everything I can to prepare for that to happen, right? So in the dentist chair, I mean, I can think, okay, you know, the scalar, I'm going to feel pain. There's going to be pain at some point. What do I need to do now to prepare myself to just accept that and be able to just experience it, you know, with as little trauma and as little like kind of, yeah, fear and anxiety and mental disturbance as possible. Yeah, I forgot the question now, but I think that I responded to it. Though. What was the question again, Teresa?
Fear is such a destructive emotion, yet it's not a distinct poison. It must then be a constituent of one of the three poisons. Which one would that be?
Yeah, so attachment. I think it's more related to attachment. Yeah. I mean, another word about that, because anger, the other option is anger, right? I mean, they both arise from ignorance. But anger actually, I mean, well, I guess I can say it has, I mean, I don't know, I feel like I shouldn't say because Buddhist teachers never say this, but there's some positive qualities to anger, probably. I'll say. So I think I've heard Matthew Ricard say that before, so I'm not alone. But you don't see it talked about in scriptures, but you know, I mean, anger is fundamentally destructive and negative emotion. But some things that are positive aspects of anger, you could say, are it gives us a lot of energy. You know, when we become angry, all of a sudden we become very powerful. Physically, mentally, we feel very strong. It draws like on a lot of like energy resources that we have within us, and it kind of taps into those in a very effective way. That, you know, the moment we're really you know, in a rage, we feel like physically you feel very strong, mentally you feel very strong. That's kind of, I mean, if you can use that strength, that same strength in a positive way, that can be very positive, no? And then another thing about anger is actually I think it reduces fear. I mean, anger might well arise from fear, you know, be caused by fear, but in the moment you're really angry, I think similarly to you feel really strong, you can feel really invincible. There's also a kind of, there can be a kind of, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but sometimes it can be, I think, that anger causes you to feel kind of courageous and very brave. So I think I don't know, I mean, I haven't thought about this question much, but it seemed to me in some cases, anger, it helps to reduce fear, actually, for better or worse. I mean, oftentimes that leads you into doing and saying things that actually you regret later on. I mean, that's the big, I mean, another big drawback of anger is it causes, like I mentioned before, it causes you to be totally irrational, to not think clearly, and just do things without thinking, right? So then harming, especially harming other people in ways that later on you have a lot of regret about. And doing things that will have outcomes, like I mentioned the example before of the prisoners. Many people, you know, people in prison for having committed crimes, mostly it's, you know, in a moment of anger. So I'm not encouraging you to become angry and to overcome your fear. But that's why I think fear is not related to so much to anger. I think fear arises from anger more often. I mean, oftentimes, rather than fear being a kind of anger. So yeah, fear is more related to attachment. But then anger and attachment, they're both rooted in ignorance, right? But maybe I'll just pause there. If there's another question, I can directly address a question. Otherwise, I can talk more about that. Was that question from Facebook, Fariza? Were you reading that from
No,
Facebook
no, no.
comment?
That's from Roy.
I know, but how did you get the question?
He's
'cause
here.
It's not here in the chat.
He's here now. He's
But
here.
did you, oh, in your room.
Here in Zoom.
Really? But how did he give you the question if not through the chat? 'Cause I can see
Privately.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Who's here? Who else is here in the Zoom room? Do you have any questions?
Joyaji raised Aaron,
Joya,
Shubangi. So there are three
Where's Joya?
questions. Yeah. So Joyaji, go ahead. Aaron and Shubhangi, please wait.
Joyaji, you're in Delhi, aren't you? Joyaji, can you unmute yourself?
Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay, I hear you.
Unmuted? Have I unmuted?
Yes,
Can you?
are. I can
Okay.
hear you.
You said fear is also not in the 22 secondary afflictions. You know, I'm thinking of a time when India was much more wild in those times when these books were being written, say Vasu Bandhu, you know, Abhidharma Kosha and others.
Yeah.
But what is the reference for? What is that main scripture where these lists of afflictions and others come from? I mean, I just assumed it was Abhidharma Kosha.
It is, yeah, Abhidharma Kosha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at a time when, you know, there were kings, when you think of how the Shakyas, you know, the Sakyas were completely destroyed by this emperor, whoever he was, Pushamitra or somebody who said, because he got concubine's daughter in marriage for his son or something like that. And when he realized it, he said, I'm going to exterminate the Shakyas. So he did. And that's why they ran away to Nepal. So when you had kings and monarchs who could do anything for you, you had warring armies at the time when these scriptures were being written. And then you had bandits, you had jungle, you had managing tigers up to the 1800s in Jharkhand, South Bihar.
A lot of snakes too, probably.
Were finished.
A lot of diseases.
Disease.
So yeah. So what's your question, Joy?
My question is, when it was very common, and when the experience of many bodhisattvas like Yuan-sang, he was attacked by bandits, and they tied him up and said, "We're going to drown you in the Ganga." And he, being a bodhisattva, he goes into meditation in his book. You know that he says, "Decided I'll just go to Maitreya now, and this is over." Yeah. And then something happened, and he was saved. But everybody else who couldn't do those things, they were perpetually in this fear of bandits, you know, the traders, the merchants.
True. Yeah.
How is it wasn't put in? Because it's a very destructive emotion. It makes you suspicious of others. Anybody could be a potential person who could harm you, a potential murderer. And in context, if I were to see somebody, say, lynching somebody else, I have a fear of that. I have a personal fear because I'd have to jump into the scene.
Yeah. In short, I don't know why fear didn't make the list. I mean, I don't want to leave you guys hanging here. I could just jump. I mean, I have that list on file here, but I don't think fear is there. Should I check? Who's maybe Aaron? What's your question?
Okay. So can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So when I have anxiety, like it feels so loaded. Like it doesn't just feel like it's just anxiety. Like it feels like it could be like afflictive doubt, negative thoughts, and then shame, and then anxiety of the anxiety. And then there's like this intense like sensation as well in the body. So like you talking about just kind of letting go and like redirecting attention.
It doesn't work.
It seems so much easier said than done, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any advice on that? Like what can just like stop it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that easy. You know, I think one of the best books I've read on dealing with anxiety using some Buddhist techniques is called Your Mind is Not Your Brain by Jeffrey Schwartz. We discussed in that Science of Happiness and Meditation. Jeffrey Schwartz. Okay. He's a psychologist at University of UCLA, I believe. And he treats people with obsessive compulsive disorder, right? Which is a kind of extreme form of anxiety. And other anxiety disorders. But the thing is, I mean, I think one reason why when we become anxious, it's so difficult to deal with is because there are neural pathways in the brain that we form that are triggered when we become anxious about something. Like this whole set of reactions just are set off, you know?
Yeah.
So it's part of this, and that's something it's a habit we built up. I mean, well, it can be different ways. I mean, Jeffrey Schwartz describes this in some cases it's a habit, but in some cases it's just the biochemistry of our brain. I mean, he describes that way. That's just it's kind of for people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, they really have these totally irrational compulsions, you know, to like wash their hands again and again and again, even though they know their hands are not dirty, or even though they touch something that is they know is actually clean, but they're just worried that, oh, there might have been a germ on it. Or people who like, another common one is, you know, you're outside, you come back to your home or your apartment and you lock the door, and then you go to your room and maybe change your clothes, and then you're not sure if you locked the door or not. So you go check the door to see if it's locked again. So every 30 minutes or something, you go to the door to check if it's locked or wash your hands. So he says that, you know, with people with that kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, they know that what the thought arises in their mind, oh, maybe I didn't lock the door. But if rationally, if they think, did I lock the door or not, they can remember locking the door. They know they did. And they know that the thought that is doubting that is irrational. Mm-hmm. But the compulsion is so strong to go check the door that it's really difficult not to follow that compulsion. Yeah. So the way he's had very high success rate treating people is to treat people, first of all, to identify that, you know, that thought to go lock the door is just a thought. You don't have to follow that thought. So you can apply that to anxiety also. That the things that are the thoughts that are causing us anxiety, they're just thoughts arising in our mind. So, and we can decide whether to follow those or not, even though it might be much more difficult to not follow, right? Because if we have the habit, it can be much easier just to dwell on the things that are causing us to feel anxious. But and then the thing you teach people to do, recognize that it's a thought, it's arising as due to, you know, malfunction in your brain or due to kind of wrong habituation. And then practice learning to focus your attention on something else. So the thing is, it's really difficult. That's the hardest part, right? Is in that moment when you're feeling really anxious, to change the focus of your attention. But also, I mean, but with practice, it becomes easier. But also, I mean, I think it's important to realize just changing your attention all the time away from the thing that's causing you to be anxious is not really getting at the underlying cause. You know, ultimately, that's not really going to eliminate the cause of the anxiety, right? So in each different case, you know, like I mean, I don't know, this probably is not a very helpful example, but because, yeah, I mean, but maybe, I mean, if you could tell me more, give me more specific kind of things that cause you to have anxiety. I mean, maybe I could give more specific advice, but, you know, my little example of being in the dental chair, you know, of course, just focusing my attention on something else, that can reduce the kind of fear of the pain that's coming. But I mean, and that can help quite a lot. But it depends how strong your attention is. If you can really, I mean, fully focus your attention on something else, then you could be like almost unaware of what's happening with your teeth. But my attention is totally not like that, right? So, so for me, I find it more helpful to focus on the kind of the attachment to not wanting that sensation of pain, and then being ready for like, well, when that sensation comes, how am I going to, just to be calm, right? But I don't know, what are some more specific things about the kind of anxiety you're talking about?
Yeah, kind of like social anxiety seems to be like the main thing. But I also related to the other person's question, like there's kind of like this underlying low, lightweight anxiety, but I think the main thing is social anxiety. Like even just before asking this question, like so much anxiety came up, you know.
Yeah.
But then I just went
I
for it.
also have that in groups, asking a question in a big audience.
Yeah.
I mean, here's quite a small audience, and they're very nice people. They're
Hello,
very
nice
easy
people.
Yeah, but asking a question in a big audience, like I know in the monastery, I used to have a line. We have to get up and debate in front of other people. Like we usually in the evenings. Now during the pandemic, no, but I'm running out of time here. But in our usual debate environment, we sit in groups of like 20 monks each evening. I mean, now I've been here like 16 years, so it's not, and I know, I mean, everybody, all my classmates. But at first, when I was new, you know, you're in this group of 20 people, you don't really know the other people. And I'm speaking in the second language in Tibetan. And then you get up in front of them and debate. I used to really get anxious about, you know, doing that, even before I stand up, not to mention then you're standing up trying to like talk and debate. But I think, I mean, I find it's helpful just to think like, I don't care what they think. It doesn't matter. I mean, whatever they think, whether that some are going to think something good and some are going to think something bad, you can't help that. I mean, no, how whatever you do, you know, whatever you do, it actually, I mean, yeah, you could really mess up. But even then, some people are going to think, oh, that's so cute, or that's, you know, oh, the poor guy. You know, they're going to be really empathetic, and you're not going to think something bad. So then what is, I mean, there's no problem with that. Some people might think, oh, you know, what a fool, what an idiot. But then, so what? then what? No. Yeah. I mean, I asked my main teacher, Lama Lundra, what to do about that one time. And he said, just stand up and tell everybody, like, look, I'm scared, I'm anxious, look at me, I'm really anxious. Like, and then it just kind of like make a fool of yourself. Like, then it kind of, it can help. But I think that does help. I mean, thinking about, okay, other people are going to think something about me, but what does that matter in the long run, in the end? I mean, there are some situations where it could matter, but whatever we do, you know, even we feel like we you know, in front of other people, we say something really impressive or really intelligent, or we're you know, we're really you know, kind of, you know, we feel like we're at our best. Still, someone's going to think we're a fool, you know? And still someone's not going to like, perhaps.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I find it helpful just to let go of those things, but to, I mean, and that is one of the kind of fearlessnesses that is a quality of the Buddha, right? There's different qualities that a Buddha has. There's four fearlessnesses, yeah, four fearlessnesses, I guess, that a Buddha has. They're mostly related to speaking in front of other people, right? Because if a person is fearful of speaking in front of other people, then it inhibits even if they have something really useful to say, and really that could be really helpful to those people, that fear inhibits them, right, from doing that. So there's a kind of fearlessness where the Buddha has, I mean, I don't remember all four distinctly, but I know they're all related to speaking in front of other people, where one, yeah, that you, so, yeah, so that the Buddha cannot be intimidated by opponents, cannot be like, because also if you become fearful, then you get confused and then you say something that's mistaken, right? You make mistakes and then you might mislead people. That's why the Buddha's speech is always, it's compared to a lion's roar, because in the forest, the lion is not afraid, right? Because they have no predators. The lion, they only die of old age. They don't die of being killed. I mean, maybe once in a while one gets stomped on by an elephant or something, but usually they just die of old age. No, especially the kind of the king of the lions, right? So the Buddha is compared to a lion. The speech is compared to the roar of a lion because they can speak eloquently in the midst of others, and actually because they destroy the wrong views. With people who have wrong views, actually, I was just reading in one of the stories in this book, the Buddha was saying that why was he giving that analogy of a lion? Because he was saying that when the Buddhas come to a world system and they teach that all compounded phenomena are impermanent and form is impermanent. So therefore, everyone who has a body, eventually that body will disintegrate and die. That causes fear to arise in the minds of the devas of the desire realm, and maybe the form and formless realms as well. But there's these deities, abiding in the desire realm and maybe the form and formless realms, who they have the idea that their lives are permanent, that their lives will last forever. Ooh, sorry, my battery warning just came on. I haven't had my computer plugged in the whole time, but I have power, so don't worry. And our time is almost up. So that when the Buddhists teach that all forms are all impermanent, physical bodies are all impermanent, eventually they'll disintegrate and die, that it causes fear to arise in the minds of these deities who are abiding in this kind of paradise like heaven, that they think that their lives will last forever, and they hear the Buddha teach this and they get fear, realizing that, oh, it's true what he says, and eventually we're going to die away from this situation, and then what's going to happen to us? So again, that's probably a kind of healthy fear. Yeah. But in social situations, I mean, again, like it's another, compassion, I think, is always the best attitude. I mean, in many situations, compassion, just having compassion for people is the best attitude. So how does compassion work to reduce anxiety and fear in a social setting? Because our anxiety and fear comes because we're focused on what do people think about me? We're focused on I, right? Compassion changes our emphasis. We think more about other people. Well, how are those people doing? I don't care about what people think about me. How are they? Instead of thinking about what people think about me, that causes us to have fear. Think about, well, how are these other people? Are they okay? Is there anything I can do to help them? Are there any questions I might ask that, that they might feel like, I'm paying attention to them, or something they might like to talk about? Or are they suffering in any way? Is there anything they might need? Or so change the focus of your attention to others, and that will help reduce the anxiety. And not only focus on others, but don't focus on others in a way where you're comparing, well, what are they wearing? What are they saying? What are they doing? Don't compare yourself with others. Focus on them with compassion, to just really care about them. They're like me, they want happiness. They're like me, they have problems, they have suffering. What can I do? How can I use this time of being with them to reduce their suffering? So even, I imagine if you're in a big audience and you have a chance to stand up and talk, if you really generate, instead of thinking about what do those people think about me, or how am I going to present myself compared to them, we're in competition, just think about, well, okay, I'm going to try to ask a question, I'm going to try to say something. I don't know if it'll go well, but I hope it will benefit people somehow. If you focus on a kind of positive motivation like that, then it can be a good anchor to keep yourself calm and keep the mind focused in a positive way. And then even if it's a total disaster and you feel like everybody thinks you're just a fool and idiot, at least inside that, well, my motivation was good. I was trying to do the best that I can, and that's the best I can do. What else, And because the thing is, if we're afraid and we don't act, we don't do anything, then we're really, it's not fair to others in a way. When there's an opportunity that we maybe could do something to help someone else, because of our own fear, we don't do it, right? And then it's kind of like, if everybody's like that, then nothing, changes. Nothing, nobody helps each other, basically. So I think Fariza posted up the 4 fearlessnesses here. Yeah, you're welcome. I'll just read them out quickly, and then we should dedicate. The fearlessness in proclaiming, let's see, make sure it's right first. Yeah, it's right. Okay, I think so. Fearlessness in proclaiming your realization, your quality of cessation of mental defilements. Yeah. So the fearlessness in proclaiming your quality of having ceased all the mental defilements. So these are the Buddha's 4 fearlessnesses that they perfect. So they're not afraid to proclaim that they have abandoned all mental afflictions, because it's true, they have. And then the fearlessness in proclaiming your quality of realization. So they have no fear in proclaiming what they have realized, that they have achieved omniscience or perfection of generosity and so forth. Again, because it's true. The fearlessness in proclaiming the remedies of the mental defilement. So explaining what are the antidotes and the remedies to the mental defilements. They have no fear in proclaiming those because they've seen that for themselves in their own experience. They know it to be true. And then finally, the fearlessness in proclaiming what the mental defilements are, which need to be abandoned, right? So they have fearlessness in explaining what are the mental defilements to be abandoned, right? Because in their own experience, they've seen that to be true. So, I mean, maybe this is one last helpful piece of advice for overcoming fear and anxiety, is to focus on what we know to be true. Focus on that rather than on what we imagine might be wrong. So maybe in a social context, a social setting, focus on just, being honest, right? Saying, presenting, not being worried what others think about us, but also in the way, what we say, what we do, not being pretentious at all, just focusing on, expressing things about what we actually know about our own experience, what we are confident in knowing, and also our questions. I don't know. So I don't know. I hope something there was helpful to all of you. Yeah, if there are any more questions, that follow. So I don't know, for homework, how to meditate on anxiety. One should practice shifting your attention. Try to focus your attention on more positive things, being, what can I do to bring about positive outcomes rather than worrying about negative outcomes. Trying to practice acceptance, accepting that there are certain, potential that, death will happen today, that we'll get sick, that things will go really bad. And then, so imagine, well, what can I do now to prepare to deal with that situation? And then practice compassion for others, recognizing that other people have these same difficulties that I have. What can I do to help them? And then, I mean, emptiness helps also, but I didn't get to emptiness. Maybe we can talk about later. But when you feel anxious and feel fear, anxiety arising, looking for the I. At that time, the object of negation, the inherent resistant person, appears very clearly. So then look for, well, who is it that feels fear? Who is it feels anxiety? Is it in the body? Is it in the mind? No. Where is it? It's merely imputed by my mind. It's like a dream. It's like an illusion, right? So that can help a lot. Okay, so I'll just dedicate. So think of all the merit we've created together. Rejoice. Think how excellent it is. How wonderful. And think of all the merit created by so many other sentient beings, especially all those benefiting one another. And now in the pandemic, all the healthcare workers, all the frontline workers, people doing cleaning, rescue services, and then recently in the floods, during the floods in Assam, and now people working on recovery efforts, saving people from floods, helping people return to their homes, clean up their homes, restore their livelihoods. People rescuing, saving, treating animals. So we rejoice in all the good things people do to help to benefit one another, and then we rejoice in all the enlightened activities of our holy gurus, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all the lineage gurus from beginning with Shakyamuni Buddha, and before even down to now. So all this positive energy, this merit, we gather together. We dedicate that all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering, physical and mental suffering, and then every form of violence, conflict, oppression, abuse, and so forth, hunger, thirst in the world. That all these are eliminated, especially our destruction of the natural environment. That we can bring it to cease our dependence upon fossil fuels, reverse our destruction of the climate, and rather preserve the natural environments on Earth for in ways that will be the most beneficial and supportive to the flourishing of all life forms, especially humans. And then may all causes for every form of mental and physical well-being for ourselves and others quickly come about. Especially may the Buddha Dharma flourish. May all of our own actions not be harmful in the least to any sentient being, ourselves or others, and be only beneficial. May we benefit others as much as possible. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And may all our gurus again have long and stable lives, and all their holy wishes be perfectly fulfilled. And may Ngari Ling, this Dharma Center in Guwahati and Assam, may it continue to flourish long into the future, offering many Dharma events and courses and services in the service of sentient beings and the service of the Buddha Dharma for many years into the future. May it continue to flourish and receive all the means of support it needs, for volunteers, financial support, and so forth. Okay, thank you all, and hope to see you again next week.
Thank you, Legtsok.
Any last words, Bhaskar?
I know, a big thank you to you on behalf of everyone, and hope to see everyone next week, where we are going to talk about patience.
Patience, yes.
Yeah, please teach us to be as patient as you next time.
Well, I don't know. I'm not very patient.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a nice evening. Legtsok, have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Legtsok.
Welcome.
Thank you. See you.